Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending this virtual presentation of the War on Terror Film Festival. We're excited to bring to you this panel conversation. Hopefully, we're going to be joined by a couple members of the impacted families. But as of now, want to get right into it. We're very lucky to be joined by the filmmakers of the Newburgh Sting, Davis and David Heilbroner. Thank you guys so much for being here. They won a Peabody Award for this film. They also, as it's listed, and you can correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but the Founders Prize Special Award at the Traverse City Film Festival. They are longtime filmmakers. They've since that film that you just watched, they've made a short called Traffic Stop, and they also worked on a film called Say Her Name: The Life and Death of Sandra Bland. And if I'm reading this correctly, Dave was also working on a film called Dionne Warwick. Is that how you say her name? Dionne Warwick.
Warwick, yeah.
Yeah. Don't Make Me Over.
Correct.
Yeah. And then we also have Kathy Manley, a longtime activist, longtime person grinding away on the front lines of these issues. She's a legal director for the Coalition for Civil Freedom, leading efforts for compassionate release for 3 of the 4 of the Newburgh Four, as they're called. And I just want to really start there with you, Kathy. For folks that don't really know the story, but kind of want to understand where it's at, maybe you can give us the update on where we are and what you're working on, and what is compassionate release. And you're muted, by the way.
Sorry about that. Yep. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So we work on many unfair cases, and this is definitely one where these guys got 25-year mandatory minimum sentences, and they were basically targeted just for being poor and black in Newburgh and slightly Muslim. They weren't really practicing Muslims. I look at this as Shahed Hussein, the informant, and James Cromedy basically conning each other, and that kind of came out in the movie. It was all about the money. It should have been classic entrapment. The reason the entrapment defense didn't work is because of the way the courts defined predisposition. Predisposition is supposed to mean that the people were predisposed to do this before the informant started offering them lots of money. But the courts now define predisposition as things they say after the informant offers them money. So when the informant offers them money and they say, oh yeah, I'd love to do that, I always wanted to blow things up, or whatever, James said a whole bunch of stuff, that's considered predisposition, but it's not. And so that's why the entrapment defense didn't work, to oversimplify it. David wanted money for an operation for his brother Lord that came out in the movie. Anta and Laguerre were just lookouts, and Anta is severely mentally ill, like many Sting targets. Clearly, none of them had any interest in any terrorism. The government created the whole thing. And then that takedown, when they arrested them, it was pure theater, helicopters, armored vehicles, bomb squads, even though they had told Stewart Air Force Base, don't worry, there's no real threat. These guys wouldn't do anything without the informant there. And they knew all that. And it's horrible. And to make it even worse, the government made it so that the 25-year mandatory minimum applied by bringing in this fake Stinger missile. And the judge knew all that, and she actually said so. She called this case the unterrorism case, but she still gave them that 25 years because she felt, and she could have maybe done something different, but it would have been a stretch. She felt that the law didn't give her any alternative. And then the movie doesn't show what happened on appeal, but everything was upheld on appeal, but there was a dissent. One of the judges said that
Dennis Jacobs.
James Cromedy was entrapped. And that so back then, after that appeal, after the case was upheld on appeal, the Supreme Court didn't take the case, and there was nothing else that could be done legally, really. But then the First Step Act was passed a few years ago, which created the ability to go to court and ask for compassionate release. And we realized at some point, actually last year, wait a minute, we thought compassionate release originally was just for medical issues, because that's what it always had been for. But because of the way this law was written, it can be for any extraordinary and compelling reason. A judge can now reduce a sentence. And in most of our cases, it's hard to argue that because the judge wanted to give them whatever sentence the judge gave them. But in this case, she had no choice really but to give them the 25 years. And so now we're going back, we're getting very ready to file. I'm representing Laguerre, and Steve Downs is representing David Williams. Ms. Gupta is representing Anta Williams. And we're hoping to file within the next couple, 2-3 weeks by the end of this month. And we're very hopeful that now that the First Step Act is in place, the judge can reduce the sentences to time served. They've already served way more than they should have. I mean, they shouldn't have served any time on this. They were entrapped. But anyway, we're hoping that the judge will grant this now, and they can get out soon.
And we'll post a link to the petition for anybody that wants to sign it to push compassionate release. So it'll be in the chat for anybody that's watching. But I just want to ask you one more thing before I go to Kate and David. To say their name, to jump off of David and Kate's one of their last films. We want to say the name of the Newburgh Four, the names of the Newburgh Four. So we have David Williams, Anta Williams, Laguerre Payne, and James Cromedy. Now, James Cromedy was kind of the quote-unquote ringleader. He was the one that first made contact with Shahid Hussein, the informant. And if that's correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but Shahid Hussein, just to mention him again, he went around the country from Pittsburgh to various places, Albany, obviously with the case there with Yassin Arif and the pizza owner, Mohammed Hussein. So he went around entrapping people. But what's crazy is that this guy came into the country illegally on a fake passport and then got caught committing crimes and agreed to work off his crimes by being an informant. And the idea of using somebody like this, I don't think a lot of people understand how that's possible. I think maybe sometimes we think informants are just undercover agents, or they're walking with some kind of ethical badge or moral compass to do the right thing, instead of maybe having a quota. And again, this is not to say that people shouldn't be held accountable for the criminality or quote unquote, or the things that they might be participating in. There's a level of crime that might be associated with people's actions, but for somebody like this to come in and basically, try to give candy to a baby, find somebody in a desperate situation and to take advantage of them. How is that legal? That somebody like Shahid Hussein, but which, by the way, for people that don't know, he's later responsible directly for the death of 20 people. If people remember the limousine accident in upstate New York, that, he had a limousine company. This is many years later after being an informant that was running with fraudulent, inspections and licenses. And, later, during I think I should have looked this part up, but I believe it was a wedding ceremony, and they were, on the way to an event, and the limousine flipped and 20 people were killed. And this is the person that the United States government used to entrap these men. How is it possible this guy could have been used?
I mean, that's what they do. They use people like him. And he's kind of an extreme example because he's really a pathological liar and does nothing in his whole life except fraud and deceit and taking advantage of vulnerable people. In this case, he was just trolling for anybody he could find that was, would take his bait. He found James in the parking lot of the mosque. And Shahid Hussein committed perjury every day, every minute on the stand when he testified in the Newburgh case, including saying that offering James Cromedy $250,000 was a code word, right? I mean, that was so outrageous. But the U.S. attorney, the prosecutor, told the jury that they believed Shahid Hussein that it was a code word. They actually said that to the jury. And on appeal, that was challenged. And the Second Circuit Court of Appeals said, well, of course, the jury knew better than to believe the prosecutor on that. So, I mean, that was interesting. And that I think the limo crash, I think he got the money for the limo crash from the FBI, because they were paying him for this case and another case after that, which if you stay tuned with us today in this film festival, you'll see the case T. Error, and he plays a role in that. And so does that $250,000 quote, interestingly. So stay tuned for that. And, but the limo crash, it was horrendous. And he owned a company, which I think he got the money from the FBI. And then he left his son to deal with this crash, and his son got convicted and actually got sentenced to probation recently. And Shahid Hussain just stayed in Pakistan, just left his son to face the consequences, which is just how he is.
Yeah. So
I wanted to, because it's worth mentioning, I used to be a prosecutor before I was a filmmaker. And a note about informants is that it's really common to use informants who are themselves criminals. You infiltrate the mafia, you might get a mafioso hitman to flip on you. And he'll wear a wire and he'll break into an existing criminal network and be the mole on whom you use to build a case. What's really messed up about the Shahid Hussain is that they found this guy who was faking driver's license tests, right? He was not part of any terrorist network at all. And he says, I'll help you find terrorists. And he creates a fake terrorist ring. And it's the opposite of how any informant that I've ever, besides these cases, I've ever seen the FBI use and prosecutors use. You find someone who's in an existing network and they get you inside. Here, Shahid created a network. The guys didn't even know each other.
That was at the behest of the FBI, though. The FBI created it that way. They knew, and they said, you got to bring other guys in. And they taught him how to do this, in our case, first in Albany, New York. That was where he got caught at the DMV faking the driver's licenses.
Yeah. So
he said, well, work with us, and they told him exactly what to do. He didn't always listen to them. He lied to them too. He can't help himself from lying.
He continued on as he built his limousine company.
It wasn't like he came up with the idea of creating these fake terrorists. Like, that was the FBI.
So you think of the name informant, like the word is you're informing on somebody that's already going on. And there was nothing going on. So Shahid Hussain actually isn't really an informant in any reasonable definition of the term. He's a
agent provocateur, right?
Agent provocateur, exactly.
Yeah. I should say that. I always say informant because it's easier to say, but you're right. You're totally right.
Yeah.
The film for me is just, it's like to me, it's just the most telling story that I've ever witnessed, of where you can clearly see that intersection between the war on crime and the war on terror. Yeah. And when you look into Newburgh and you understand Newburgh and you understand that, the only thriving economy, one of the most thriving is the drug trade. It's such a devastated city. It looks like a bomb. You really can't tell if a bomb was just dropped on it or if the city's rising from ashes. And for this case to be developed and built, off the backs of individuals that were in such desperate situation, it's a tragedy. And just to go to the film itself and to, David and Kate here, and to answer somebody's question, which is, in the chat here, I think the name is, how do we say that? Nachizia. So, this was the question I wanted to ask you, Kate. I mean, how and why did this film get on your radar, the story get on your radar? Why did you choose the manner in which you told the story, the style, the look of it, and how do you feel it came off from what your original intentions were? So basically, how did the story get on the radar for you?
David, you can start with that part.
Well, the radar was because I used to be a prosecutor. I go back to my old law school from time to time, and we had a film out called Stonewall Uprising about the birth of the gay power movement. I was showing the film, and one of my law professors pulled me aside and said, you really have to take a look at what's going on with the Muslim community in America and the FBI. Said they're really being surveilled, they're being entrapped, there's all this awful stuff. And I said, all right, that sounds really intriguing. And I just started making phone calls. And I finally stumbled. And basically, this was the most clear-cut, egregious, awful case of FBI entrapment, overreach. And thank you to the FBI, they filmed most of it. And so, you can watch this go down. It isn't a he said, she said situation. And that's what made me, like Katie and I have been film partners forever. And I said, I think we have everything we need here to tell this story and make it really stand up.
Right. And we were, I would say, just fortunate that the family, particularly of David Williams, participated, and they were extremely passionate and articulate, however traumatized they are still by, their loved one being imprisoned wrongfully. To me, as less of a legalist point of view, just as a humanitarian, cares about social issues, I just couldn't believe that. I felt like I was making a science fiction film. It's hard to watch this and believe that our government pours money into these kinds of practices, because the level of, you were saying that we were a minute ago that maybe Hussain really isn't an informant. the technical definition of the word, and the guys are not really terrorists either. In fact, I really wonder if any of them know what jihad means. And furthermore, so there's these levels, like that's what made the film such a surreal and upsetting, bizarre experience to make, which is like we kept on uncovering sort of layers of lies and deceit, and all on the backs of taxpayers, really, you know, in order to, I guess, in part make, you know, keep the money flowing through Congress to fight the war on domestic terror, which really didn't exist in any big way back then. And actually, a lot of the people who committed terrorist acts are white Christians, but it's sure easier to pin that on a group of people who are scary traditionally to the power elite or voters across the country. And so, you know, it's just a big PR scam. And we citizens are not only victims of that scam, but I mean, financially, but also just morally, you know, it just breeds animosity and racism and all that. So this was a pretty rich palette of just horrors.
And we found that one clip, for people who have seen the film, you'll remember Robert Mueller comes to testify before Congress every year, which he does to justify the good work of the FBI. And Robert Mueller has certainly done some great things recently. But at the time, he was running the FBI, and he said, "Let me tell you about the war on terror, the great job we're doing." And the first case out of his mouth is the Newburgh Four. And you realize that these four hapless souls in Newburgh are pawns in this very, very, very high level, high stakes game. And, you know, to get that quote and to get all this FBI footage, it just felt like it was a film that was, you know, it felt like fate handed us the movie. Like, here you go, guys. Here's everything you need to make a documentary.
I mean, Cromedy, the gentleman, one of the Newburgh Four, James Cromedy, when he was first approached by the informant and befriended by him, and you know, he was handed a camera at one point, what I read, right? And he was asked to record his, you know, the conspiracy, and he went and just sold the camera.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And, you know, at the same time, he would falsely claim that he traveled overseas. And later it was reported that they thought they needed a passport. Then some of the guys thought they needed a passport just to leave New York State. Yeah. This is the situation they're in. When you guys were making this film, and Kate, maybe you can answer this also, is that, you know, did you, you know, as journalists, as filmmakers, did you see the story right from the beginning, from the get-go, or did it literally just evolve as you were putting it together? You know, were you able, you know, yeah.
Well, I think we knew, we were familiar with the sort of the outline of the story, and these guys were already imprisoned, and, you know, and so what did we discover along the way? No, I think it was, you know, one of the things is we worked really closely with the Muslim community in Newburgh, and they were so welcoming and thankful that the record would get out there and be corrected maybe a little bit by the film. So for me personally, I mean, that was a big, very meaningful part of the filmmaking experience. You know, because I had never really been inside mosques, and, you know, we were headdressed, and they let us film, and we became friends with several of the imams there. And I just feel like it was all about breaking down walls between groups and humanizing these guys too, I mean, David Williams said, well, we're not going to hurt anybody, are we? I mean, we're only going to go to the synagogue to bomb it at night when nobody's there. That's also in their footage, and yet he's, you know, labeled as, you know, one of the most wanted terrorists in the country at the time. So
yeah, I mean, we kept because I'm really scrupulous about getting this right. You know, it's so easy to make a finger pointing documentary, but I kept looking for the other side of this. Like, where's the government's case? Like, what are they seeing? What are they doing? What am I missing here? And, you know, we looked and looked and looked, and there was never a good explanation for why the government was doing this except for political gain. You know, never any cogent reason why they would go after these guys except to, you know, create the illusion that the FBI is fighting a war on terror. Whereas, you know, if you want to put these guys in jail, get them for what, if they do, like James Cromedy, you know, he sells pot. If you, okay, have him I tell him to get me a pound of pot and you bust him when he delivers it. I mean, I'm okay with that, but I'm not okay with calling some guy a terrorist who's not, and creating a ring of people who don't even know each other. And there was no good explanation that ever emerged for why they did it, except a very dark but real need for political gain.
That's really true. We went in thinking there's got to be another side, and I think it was important for us to keep open all the way along the filmmaking, experience to be open to the possibility that we're really missing something about any one of these guys, about Hussein, about it. And so the devil was in the details. It was just the uncovering, and it just kind of gotten more and more rotten to the core.
And we looked. I mean, I don't want to be caught flat-footed down the road with a film and go, oh man, you. And I was ready to be just killed by the New York Times or something, and they'd find some reason to hate the film and discredit it. And I have to say, we won the Peabody Award. We got great reviews. Nobody ever said the film was factually inaccurate or that we were overstating it, which felt we were taking a bit of a risk because some people didn't even want to talk to us. A bunch of the lawyers refused to talk to us. The FBI refused to talk to us. The prosecutors refused to talk to us. And even some of the friends of the defendants refused to talk to us. You're taking on the FBI, right? I mean, you don't do that casually. So we were, friends of ours kept saying, are you guys worried about traveling? You're going to get, I don't know, patted down and, detained. But it was, we pulled it off. I'm proud of that. And I hope, Kathy, my fingers are crossed for you, man. I mean, that's the real thing. Our movie is one thing, but 4 guys are still paying the price, and that's the real. So
I'm going to come back to Kathy in a second here. First, I just want to acknowledge Kiki McWilliams, the aunt of David Williams. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to come back to you in 1 second here. I just want to ask Kate one more thing because she has to head out in a little bit here. But, so this film is being put together. You're trying to put the elements together. There's video that people haven't seen. And, as one of the participants in the film mentions, you throw out the word terrorism or you show certain video to a jury, it's over. What were your aspirations? This might be a strange question, but when a filmmaker makes a film like this, you're obviously trying to get to the truth of the story. And I personally love that I'm able to use this story. This is the film that I send to people when I want them to see that entrapment is real. I hate that I have to send this story, and I hate that it's so good to make them understand it, but it just is. But when you put the story together, and this goes to you, Kate, again, and you answered it to some extent. I mean, what's, especially when you draw the connections between one of your later projects, Say Her Name, the story of Sandra Bland. What are the parallels and what are some of the intersections that you've seen, as you're putting these stories together, especially dealing with law enforcement and government agencies in general? Is there anything there that stands out that you think that, can kind of, magnify the issue of policing and of, targeting in general? Because these guys were targeted after all, right?
Yeah, and I think I think Sandra Bland never would have been treated the way she was on the roadside, and in a more just society. So, yeah, it's that I guess law enforcement can get away with a lot of, extremely discriminatory practices, because, if you're victims of the people you pick on and can, thrown to jail or hold up as bad guys are, if they don't have social power, if they don't really have a voice in society, then it's very, very hard for them to get justice or to, be treated equally. I guess, we got to know the law enforcement in the case of the Sandra Bland film.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. In knowing the other side, personally to a certain extent, I think they truly don't think they did anything wrong. So I guess one of the other things I learned a bit is that, that racism is it can be so deeply embedded in someone's culture and upbringing and in the system that is accepted as our justice system, that the people who really are in power aren't even necessarily aware of how horrific their actions are and the fallout, and getting to know David Williams' family a little bit. I mean, was just heartbreaking, and continues to be if I stop and think about this guy still being every day in prison, and the other three as well. And so, yeah, it's I don't know. I guess that's something I feel. What do you think, David?
I mean, actually, there's three films. Sandra Bland and Stonewall Uprising and the Newburgh Sting all involve police officers enforcing laws against minorities who are, in the big scheme of things, powerless. And when the FBI controls the prosecutorial system essentially, and when you come in, and I mean, Aunt Alicia, who's just in the film, and is one of my favorite people I've ever interviewed, because I think she's just really funny and smart. And she's just looking at the TV going, what the fuck did you do? And she's just seeing the FBI converge, and that these guys have no chance once this giant machinery of very little chance of law enforcement descends upon them. And that has happened with the gay community in the United States, which is shown in the Stonewall film. It happens with the African-American community and African-American women, and Sandra Bland, and it happens to the American Muslim community. And it's funny, I'd never put that together till right now, but all these three films do contain that commonality.
Right. I mean, it's racism and it's bigotry, and it's there's always a fundamental foundation that builds these stories and these cases. And Kiki, your mic is off, just as a reminder. But I want to come to you now. Thank you again for joining. On to David Williams. It's just an honor to be in your presence, even if it's virtually. How are you doing? And what's the latest with your family and David? And
well, good afternoon, everyone. Currently, David, of course, we're all just anticipating and waiting with the expectation that at some point we will have the opportunity to embrace him again. Not having him in the family as a actual physical being that we actually can physically touch is actually a challenge. Again, it's still a challenge also for his mother, as well, knowing that her son is still incarcerated and has that label that ultimately we know will dissipate, because just because you're labeled as something doesn't necessarily mean that's something that you have to continue to live out, as long as you're willing to tell your story the way that it needs to be told. So we wait, we wait patiently. We're all holding on to each other, expecting and hoping that each one of us will stay alive, long enough to actually hold him, and see his, see even his, new grandchild that is actually on the way. So we're just expecting that, the pieces will, come together, and it will be solidified, through our love and through all that has been done, on our family behalf. We wouldn't have never, been able to do it or get this far, without the film and without, Kathy, without the team, without the story, being presented in a way that we could not have. We did not and do not have the financial means to do it. We have the fight within us, to do it. Alicia, was very, very in the forefront, I should say, in the forefront, speaking about the story. And I don't think that the, FBI realized that there was someone in a broken family, an impoverished family, that was willing to fight. That was one of the things that she was great at. She was great at fighting. That was one of the things that we were taught, when we were younger, how to use our voices, and really how, to fight. When you grow up in a specific neighborhood, some things, you just have to learn along the way. And Alicia was, very tenacious about doing that. She was able to get out there, and she was able to bring attention, to a case that I believe that would have been swept away as many of the other cases, have been done, time before. But I'm grateful for her, sacrifice, because she sacrificed for the family, but she sacrificed also for others, allowing their story also to be told as well. And to see the progression of her from, at the beginning of the case, and then, seeing her now, the care that, she requires. And
Mm.
at some point she was, losing her vision. And I know that and I guess, when things are done, you're not thinking about those things, that what comes. But she has to see him herself. She has to see him herself. And I'm praying and hoping that her vision will, continuously, progress, that the medical doctors will be able to find the appropriate medical care for her, so that she actually will be able to see David free, because she has fought, so hard and for so long. And still within, she may be fighting and fighting, differently, as I myself, was in the back stages, and given this charge, or feeling this, no, within myself at this point, that I now can at least be the face, for the family, and at least be able to say, we're still, expecting, David to be free. David said it so well. He said, yes, charge him for something, but not, for that. I remember Alicia saying, charge them for being stupid, but don't charge them, for being, the terrorist, because it was all, as we know,
With them an
fabricated.
ankle monitor, something, but terrorism is a whole nother level.
Crazy.
It is. And it's
Yeah.
a label that how do you shake that type of, label? How do you live, past that label? How do you step back into society? And, if individuals who have felons have, trouble, stepping into society and obtaining employment, how do you expect an individual who was on, American soil, uh, supposedly, doing all of what they stated, that he has done, to the extreme? They amplified it, and I'm very grateful for the film, because the film actually gave the human piece of it. It actually allowed it allowed us to see what we didn't see, or what we didn't know. We
Mm.
knew that it was a fabricated story, but we didn't know all the pieces. And as a family, when you're sitting and you don't have all the pieces, and you're trying, to wrap your head around the fact that this is what actually is taking place. This is being, this is real time, this is real life, and this is actually happening, to your family. You don't expect that. You don't expect that from a family that came from Brooklyn, out of the projects, picking up the pieces, trying to, live their lives, coming from the struggle, striving, and hoping that our children, would understand that this is where we came from, and this is where we're going. And then we are put, a pause, and I still believe that we're still, at a halt, where, at a pause, because we don't have, David home. We miss David. David had an intricate piece, to the family, the way that he carried himself, the care and the support and the love that he showed, to the generations, that the respect that he showed to the generations before, but the care that he showed to the younger, generations. And David wasn't, humanized, and he is a young man that is a part of a family, and an important, part of the family. And I'm just hoping that his mother gets to see him. I'm hoping that he gets to see his children. I'm hoping that he gets to hold his new grandchild that is, that'll be coming. And I'm just hoping that, as we proceed forward, that all of the pieces are looked at, but that we're also looked at as a family, that it hurts. Like, even as I'm speaking about it, the rawness of the feelings continue to come, up and rise up, because it really hurts. And the only thing I could, continue to cry out and hope and expect is for his freedom, and that we will heal as a family, because the healing hasn't even begun. Because you grieve, we grieved over the loss of him. We felt the pain, and we felt, the discomfort, and we felt, the wound, freshly being pierced, again and again and again. And as long as he is not home, as long as we will continue to feel such pain, and feel discomfort, and feel the hope that he will actually be in our arms once again.
You know, I mean, the brave work that David and Kate put together by making this film happen, like you said, it brought the pieces together in a way that can help us understand it. But, you know, can you tell us, Kiki, in your way, you know, again, I mentioned it earlier, for folks that don't know Newburgh at one point, and I think there's echo coming from somebody's thing, but I'll try to say it real quick here. Newburgh is probably one of the top 50 most dangerous cities in the United States currently. At the time when this happened in 2009, I believe it was probably in the top 10. You know, how does a young black man from Newburgh become a terrorist? Where was David at the time? How could he be wrangled up into this? What do you know about where his mind was and what might have inspired him or hooked him in to getting caught in this entrapment? For people that are skeptical and they don't understand how it happens, and they want to have culpability and they want to pass guilt and criminalize, but like we said, maybe there's a level of of quote unquote responsibility, accountability. But how does a young black man from Newburgh become a terrorist? Tell us about David and where he was at the time and how this could have happened to him, from what you understand and what you feel.
Well, with David, I do know that he was actually he had moved out of Newburgh, and he was actually going to school. He was the plan was for him to actually get himself together, not just in Newburgh, because he would come to Newburgh to visit his mother, and of course to see his daughter. But he was moving on, with making some necessary changes, because as we know, he was previously, incarcerated, but not incarcerated for something that was this,
Like
astronomical.
petty crime.
Right,
Was,
petty crimes. It wasn't anything that
early
was
in his life. Yeah,
it had nothing to do with anything that was this huge, and his brother actually had gotten very ill, and extremely ill, and we was trying to figure out what we were going to do. I remember when my sister received the news, I remember her screaming so that I had to drag her, and this is no exaggeration. She was on her knees, and I had to drag her down the hallway to a private room, or try to find a room, because that's how loud her scream was, and I was concerned at the time for the other patients. So it wasn't something that was very light for the family. And then at a specific point, his stomach, actually, he looked like he was 9 months pregnant, and here it is, he was getting skinnier, but his stomach was actually getting bigger, and he was diagnosed with an illness that we was trying to figure out whether, is he going to live or is he going to die? And he was given an opportunity. He was presented with an opportunity, and not outright out front, hey, this is what we're going to do. But it was something that he was groomed. You sit and you're impoverished. You're trying to figure out how you're actually going to get money. I don't know if anyone who's listening has ever been, impoverished, but you're trying to figure things out. You're trying to figure out the food pantry. You're trying to figure out the resources in the community. You're trying to figure out how you're actually going to do what it is that you need to do in order for you and your family to stay alive. And
not to interrupt you too much, but so David is trying to figure out how to be this breadwinner for his family, and his brother is the one in the hospital facing, severe illness.
He actually was. He was actually trying to figure out not only how he was going to be that breadwinner, but how he was going to alleviate the weight off of his mother. His mother, and they're so close. I say that they're more like sister and brother. But he also is the oldest son, and he took that, and he takes that very seriously. So it wasn't something that he was like, y'all just have to figure it out. It's in the doctor's hands. That wasn't abnormal for David to want to do something to help his family. And then when he was presented with the opportunity to help his family, really help his brother, that opportunity was not taken lightly. It was something that had to be considered, because this could save his brother's life. This could help with medical bills. This could help because his mother, when I say she was stressed. And to see his mother go through what she was going through, he now is trying to figure out, how am I supposed to handle this? That is not abnormal for David. David is that type of individual. He sees something going on with the family. He would be the head runner. He would try to figure it out. And he would always come back with a solution. And his solutions always worked. They worked. And to have something this big, a medical condition that cannot be cured, that is, requiring additional funds that his mother does not have. And in Newburgh, it's significant poverty here. Not many jobs. Many of the individuals here, do not have the education that, higher education, I should say, higher education. And the transportation stops here at 5 o'clock. So, you're trying to, everything is, cabs and, or you getting a ride, so there was a lot of things that was going on, in a sense of, the poverty, him being who he is as the oldest son, figuring out what could he do to help his mother. And then again, being presented with the opportunity, that would have given him the finances, that he need. And his whole goal was to really help his mother and help his brother, get out of the financial situation that they was currently in.
Yeah, and when you say opportunity, I mean, as the film points out, and it's been pointed out many times, is being offered $250,000 to help your family out, and you're in a desperate situation, and even under those circumstances, it's been noted several times that the four men, they didn't want to see anybody get hurt. They really made an effort to express themselves that the quote unquote, attack would happen in the evening and whatever. But at the entire time, it's clear to most of us, at least, that this whole thing was a ploy just to get the money from the informant, and with zero intention of committing any act of violence against anyone. But, I want to go back to David real quick and then come back to Kathy. But I want to say to folks that are listening, if you have any questions, this is your time to send it in on the chat. We're going to try to open it up in a little bit here. So as soon as we see the questions trickle in, we'll throw them out there. But for David, there was a question for you, which is, as a former prosecutor, how do you go from being a prosecutor to putting a film like this together? And how do you see the criminal legal system, the unjust justice system, however you want to express it, and if obviously there's a lot of good, obviously the system does a lot of good, but how do you see it from where you were into where you are now? Yeah.
The reason I became a lawyer, I'm a child of the 70s, and, became a lawyer because I thought, I'll be, a crusading lawyer and reform the system from within, and all those fond dreams that didn't come to pass. And I realized I was either going to be a cog in a system that was too big for me to change from within, or I was going to get out and try to change it. So I wrote a book called Rough Justice about the DA's office in Manhattan, and did a lot of journalism. And I thought, you can maybe change the dial and raise consciousness and create political change by reaching people emotionally, and by telling true stories that are like, make people go, wow, that is not the way I read about it in the news. So that's how I made the jump from prosecuting, and specifically this case is sort of was a dream/nightmare scenario. The dream scenario is that it was an incredible story that was crying to be told. The nightmare is that it's real, that it happened. But we did, just in terms of making an impact, one of the things that was gave me some hope is, the FBI has dialed back a little bit on this. At least they did for a while. I met with some folks from the FBI privately, who agreed this was not their finest hour by any stretch. And Senator Dick Durbin held hearings. They were closed, but held hearings in DC. We showed clips of the film and appeared with the ACLU. And we've had, and so I'd like to think, we made a change, but the real change, is what Kathy's doing. The real change is to free these four gentlemen who are pawns in a much larger game that they had no idea what's going on. And the game goes all the way up the food chain, to Washington. Because understand, it's not just the FBI, because the FBI can bring charges, but the U.S. Attorney's Office then has to decide, are these the right charges for these people? And the U.S. Attorney's Office could have said, guys, this is really not what you're supposed to be doing. Let's give them an offer of 6 months and just, they'll do 6 months time and slap them on the wrist and say, don't ever do this stupid stuff again, is sort of what should have happened. And nobody was willing to stand up for what the common sense and correct thing to do was, because these guys are not terrorists. I mean, it's as simple as that. So, I'm hoping the film will reach, future FBI agents who might go, this is not what I want to be doing, reach future prosecutors who might say, yeah, I remember that film, I'm not going to make that mistake again. So that's my answer.
And SJS asks in chat, did the documentary or the corrective side of the story ever make mainstream media to expose the FBI? I mean, how much traction have you gotten, with the film?
We got press. First of all, HBO, showed the film, and it premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. It got written up in every major newspaper in the country. We appeared on lots of television to talk about it. The FBI definitely knew about it because I had meetings with them. The FBI's explanation for why they would do this is they said, look, if we don't go into these impoverished communities and recruit people, Al-Qaeda will. So we're just going to get to them first, right? That's the theory. Well, if that is your theory, you could have gone and gotten them on any number of crimes. I mean, if these are people who are desperate, who are just going to do something because you'll pay them. Like I was saying before, James Cromedy, okay, he's a pot dealer. At the time it was illegal, and set him up for doing that. That's something he's done before. It makes sense. But to come in with a crime that these people would never have contemplated in a million years, and that has enormous political ramifications around the country and reinforces prejudices around the country, and try to snooker everybody. I mean, because you really are trying to fool people when you hire at the cost of, I don't know how much, $1 million to get these bomb squads that came in to bust these guys who have no weapons, right? And 100 agents are being paid, overtime for working to do this sting. And you don't tell. I mean, even like senators, Chuck Schumer's up there saying these guys did a great job. He had no idea what was going on. Nobody did. Mm-hmm. Is appalling. So the FBI did get called to account on this publicly a lot. Of course, you're never ever going to hear the FBI say mea culpa, right? We screwed up. They did, but I think it made a dent. I'd like to think so. I don't know, Kathy. Do you think there's any? I
think you're right. I think you're right. And just on the issue of prosecutors, it's interesting. Back when you were there, I think there was no way you could have changed the office. But since then, recently there's been this movement for reform and for reform-minded prosecutors, mainly in various states and counties, like in Philadelphia, San Francisco, Los Angeles, but not so much federal. But interestingly, there was just an article in the New York Times featuring the new prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, named Damian Williams, and talked about how he could understand. He's the first African American in that office, and it talked about how he could understand the pain that families go through, Kiki. So his father was prosecuted in a case. And so I'm hoping that we can reach out to him and ask him not to oppose our motion for compassionate release.
Oh. And somebody asked, Sertinio asks, and you mentioned this earlier, has this been brought to the Supreme Court?
I believe it was, and they refused to take the case. And that was after the Second Circuit upheld everything. Even though there was a dissent, the Supreme Court refused to take it. So that's the end of that. You can't go there. And fortunately, hopefully we can get these guys out. I mean, that's the big thing, right? Mm-hmm. The three of them that we're representing, we reached out to James twice and didn't hear back from him. So hopefully eventually he'll realize and reach out to us, or somehow, if we can get the other three out, hopefully we or somebody can get him out as well. But unfortunately, we can't get the convictions reversed with this motion. This motion is to reduce the sentence to time served, hopefully, but not reverse the convictions, because there's no legal way to do that unless the law changes or there's a pardon from the president. And these are possibilities down the road. We are trying to change the law on entrapment and have an actual entrapment defense where predisposition means predisposition, that you're already predisposed. So, but as it stands, we're just trying to get them out of prison.
So are there other cases that you know of currently that are also pushing along the margins that you think are kind of in parallel with this story? And alongside that question, what kind of cases have you seen since, that might differentiate since 2009 for people?
Well, they haven't gone after people like this who had no ideas of who weren't Muslim really, who had no ideas of anything political. They've gone after people who are upset about U.S. foreign policy or have certain religious beliefs and kind of push them in the direction of doing something. So that's a little different. I think they learned maybe from this case not to just go after any random people that the informant happens to come into contact with. But one of the sad things that they have been doing recently is targeting mentally ill young men, mentally ill or otherwise very vulnerable people for that they can entrap really. That they can manipulate in various ways. So there's a lot of mentally ill targets, some that have even been declared incompetent for trial. And if you know anything about the law, that's a really tough standard. You have to be so severely mentally ill to be considered incompetent for trial. And these are people that the FBI has no problem with going after in these sting cases. So that's a huge problem too.
So Kiki, and I guess all you guys can answer this, as we're getting closer to the end here. What else do you want to see people do? I mean, beyond signing the petition, again, we're going to post the link to the petition. I hope everybody signs it. It's to push for compassionate release for David Williams and for two others, the three out of the four men. So Katie says that she's gone to vigils, she's gone to protests around the time of the trial. Is there any other organizing we can do, including in Newburgh? What else would you like to see, Kiki? And what else would the families like to see from what you know of? Don't forget your mic is muted, Kiki.
That question, because in order for you to actually even consider protests, any type of march, any type of vigil, people really have to understand and respect what we really went through as a family. And instead of the community embracing us, they separated from us, whether it was at church, wherever it was. We didn't have support. It's us. So it actually would mean that we would actually, as a family, stand and take that stand and say, okay, this is what we're doing, for David Williams, and, maybe have a sign. But in order for us to have that support in this community, people need to know that it could have happened to them as well, because we wouldn't have never thought that it would actually have happened, to us. And if it's not looked at in a compassionate, passionate, empathetic way, then there's not going to be that surround, the McWilliams family, with love and support. And yes, they're rising up, from this case, because you don't hear about the case and what we experience on, as individuals, from people whispering, to when you're trying to find employment, it actually comes up when you don't even want it to come up. So I'm not sure, really honestly, how to truly answer that question other than, from the heart. Where's the embrace? The embrace is not there. It's almost like you feel like you're in hiding.
If I could say, if we're going to file this motion soon. I don't know if we're going to actually have a court date. I'm not sure if there's going to be oral argument on it or if it's just going to be decided on the papers. And we're submitting a lot of letters. The family and a lot of other people wrote letters in support of David, and some people wrote letters for all of the defendants. So we're going to submit those. We're probably going to submit the petition if we get enough signatures, which we hopefully will. And if we do have a court date, then we would want to have a public presence there, and we would want people to come and show their support there. Other than that, I'm not sure, about the question, but hopefully we will have an opportunity for people to do that.
Yeah. And, you know, the only thing I would add, it's sort of more global, but actually really isn't that global if you think about it, is you've got to vote. You got to vote because, you know, the last administration before Biden installed a lot of very conservative judges who might not be the kind of people who would look kindly upon this case and are not going to show the kind of humanity and compassion that other the judges appointed by other administrations might. And I think, you know, if you live politically indifferently, you get what you deserve, which is whatever happened, what other people, you become a victim of it. And you have to be a political activist, even if that just means voting, you know, and fight for what you want and stand up, vote for your, you know, and it'll make a difference. It really will. You know, if we have a Trump administration again, I think the odds of your legal success, Kathy, go down. I don't know, but I'm hoping that obviously I'm praying for you, man.
Well, at least we got the judge that understands how unfair the case is, and now she has the opportunity to do something about it.
Yeah.
So hopefully she'll do the right thing.
Kiki, how's Nyla doing? David Williams' daughter. I mean, how does she process what's going on and where her dad is? I mean, she was, I forget her age when he was entrapped. How is she doing these days, and where's she at? Her space
Well,
wise.
she at the time she was about 10, I believe 10 or 11 years old, and she actually graduated out of high school, which we're very proud, you know, of that. And just hearing the news, I'm not sure if it would have been better if she would have been able to tell her own story, because that was one of the things that I was, you know, sharing previously. I can't tell anyone else's story but my own, you know what I mean, in the sense of from my perspective. But I know she's preparing, you know, to be a new mom. And I know her grandmother, which is Elizabeth, David's mom, you know, has been there supporting her, and also preparing her, you know, for the possibility and letting her know what is going on, you know, with the case, because previously it affected her mentally. You know, it was just to see her go through all that she was going through, and you know how it was affecting her in school, and you know her eating habits, and you know her being withdrawn. You know, it definitely a lot of times when things affect you, you don't naturally see it on the outside, but there's wheels and a lot of, you know, chaos that could be going on the inside, and sometimes, especially as children, they're unable to express that. But to see her evolve to this young woman that she is, you know, today, in a sense of just, you know, graduating and obtaining employment, and you know preparing to be a new mom, at least for you know, for that, I am, you know, proud of her for that.
We just have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to throw out a little announcement at the end here, but if there's anything else you guys want to add, I mean, we could never thank you guys enough for just all your work, all your effort, and then all the pain that you guys are enduring, the McWilliams family. I mean, like you said, you know, none of us can really imagine. We couldn't imagine not just going through it, but then having, you know, your life flipped upside down, but then losing all the support structures along with it. So can people visit David? Does David get visitors? What's the status with him?
Currently, there are no visitation that we actually have had, or I haven't heard of any visitation, but his mother and his daughter, and he also has a son who's about 12. He's also been in contact, you know, with David, and at least they get a chance to speak and build relationship. You know, that way he's still giving his fatherly advice, and still being, you know, who he is, you know, from the position that he's in, you know, currently. And I'm just I know that he's going to, you know, continue to have that guidance, because that's him. He'll guide you through, you know, whatever it is that you're going through. So his position currently, I'm just expecting that this release is going to be a day where I could just do more than just smile about it, but actually hold him close.
Well, thank you guys for being here. I think our time is up here, but for folks that want to stay involved and learn more and reach out to family members or have any other questions, you can subscribe to CCF's newsletter on the email list. I think it's going to be put in the chat. And I want to also remind folks that the film is going to play again. If you missed the film, there'll be a rescreening of it October 13th at 12 p.m. And another thing you can do if you want to engage, you can go back to the War on Terror Film Festival site. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the Coalition for Civil Freedoms link, as well as all the other sponsors. There's several human rights organizations, advocacy organizations, logos down there. You can just click on them and it will take you to their sites. You can donate or participate or sign up as a volunteer, and to just to continue engaging. But I wanted to thank you guys again and for allowing us to participate with you guys, and
Thanks.
all the best. You're all in our thoughts and prayers. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
Take
you.
care. All the best.
All right. Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.